Foreign policy expert Harley Lippman and Mario Loyola, a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, joins us, plus our special guest here in studio, Dr. Kanta Ahmad. Mario, let me ask you this. Blinken arrived in Israel, right, this week. No U.S. ambassador was there to greet him because we don't have one yet. President Biden has nominated former Obama Chief of Staff and Treasury Secretary Jack Lew. What do you think of that pick, and how important is it to have an ambassador in Israel right now?
I think it's very important to have an ambassador in Israel. I think that the ambassador will hopefully be confirmed quickly. We know that the U.S., the position of the United States diplomatically is crucial here because in previous conflicts between Hamas and Israel, there's right away been crisis diplomacy in the Security Council to discuss the terms of what would end up being a mandatory ceasefire that Israel would have to abide by. And that's why I think it's very important for the United States to make clear that this is not going to be a repeat of that, and that the U.S. is going to give Israel all the diplomatic cover that it needs to continue the mission until the final eradication of Hamas.
Harley, is it even possible for Israel to build, let's say, like a coalition of the willing, right, like we did and went after Iraq and try to take out Hamas and Hezbollah and maybe even confront Iran? Is it totally impossible, given the rogues at the UN, the two-faced countries in the Middle East, the spineless Europe, all that stuff? I guess I answered my own question, but what's your thought?
Yeah, you're quite correct. I don't see that as happening. Israel is on its own, except for the United States. It's encouraging that Britain did send warships to the region. That was a surprise, but a very pleasant one. So I think that what this highlights is that the head of the snake is Iran, and that all roads lead back to Tehran, the capital of Iran, and that you're never going to be able to deal effectively with Hamas or Hezbollah unless you take on Iran, because they're funding them, they're guiding them, they're giving them directions, and this is where it's all coming from. And until they pay an extraordinarily huge price, this will continue.
Dr. Ahmed, the Gaza Strip obviously is going to be lit up real soon, right? What role does Egypt play in this, or can they play in this?
It's not just Egypt. Egypt is one of the most staunch allies that Israel has had for decades. It's also Jordan, that, as you remember, administers the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem that is so beloved to billions of Muslims around the world. Egypt has a role now for humanitarian relief to maybe create a humanitarian corridor. International community will have to come and assist with that. And also, very importantly, as a channel of communications and dialogue with Israel, but also Qatar is extremely important because that's where the United States 5th Naval Fleet is. Saudi Arabia is vitally important. You don't want this conflict to become now an oil war, where we are no longer energy independent in the United States, and that could become weaponized in service of politics. I want to emphasize on social media, with social media listening agency Rilla Global, we can see 1.5 million calls to global jihad in social media. That's just publicly accessible, not all the classified channels. Those global jihad calls are for inside the countries. Iraq, 150,000 people protested and burnt the Israeli flag yesterday. You speak about spineless Europe. Germany's chancellor was the first to say, this war is our war. We stand with Israel because of the legacy of the Holocaust. So there are many forces aligning now with Israel, and the Muslim world knows the stakes are extremely high. They do not want to ignite an international global jihad. We're beginning to see lone wolf actions already, people who are claiming to do this just to, for instance, execute 2 teachers in France yesterday in the name of so-called jihad, a total affront to believing Muslims like myself. So this is much more complex, and it is an opportunity for Hamas to radicalize new generations. They're already trending hashtags on Palestinian Mujahideen to be joining this effort. It's unacceptable, it's extremely dangerous, and the world has to come and contain this.
So Mario, Israel's stated goal is to wipe out Hamas with a large-scale military campaign, which might start at any moment. Can they actually succeed, since these terrorists are like cockroaches?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been obvious since the late 18th century that the greatest limiting factor on the power of a democracy to exert military force is political, it's public opinion. Militarily, there's no doubt that Israel can go in and seize every weapon and kill anyone who resists. There's no doubt about that. The critical thing, and here's where, again, I go back to the critical role of the United States, is to make sure that Israel has the diplomatic cover that it needs and feels the political support from partner countries that it's going to need to see this through to the end. Because in the coming weeks, we're going to see scenes of a lot of devastation coming from the Gaza Strip. And it's very important for people who care about Palestinians to be told that if they care about Palestinians, they need to be calling on Hamas to surrender. They do not need to be calling on Israel to be self-restrained in its military actions, because it's these inconclusive ends to a clash between Israel and Hamas that leave Hamas standing at the end, that leave Hamas with a narrative of victory, and that leave it standing to fight another day. That's the logic that we have to break that mold here. That's why we have to insist on the unconditional surrender or total destruction of Hamas.
Harley, Lippman, Mario Loyola, thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Ahmad, we will see you again in the next hour, so don't go too far.